Analyst. Michael Crowley is diplomatic correspondent for the New York Times. Great to have both of you here. So, Mark, right now, how do we imagine the intelligence community is working to determine whether these sites were destroyed, as the president suggested? And I wonder, actually, if a definitive assessment realistically is possible.
Well, Chris, it's going to take some time. Clearly with the Iran-Israel crisis at the top of the foreign policy agenda, there's no more important priority for the intelligence community. So what does that mean? It means satellite imagery, which actually you see even commercial satellite imagery that you just showed. That's not going to tell us a whole lot. But then it goes to things such as signals intelligence, which is intercepts of Iranian communications, leadership communications, intelligence, their intelligence services, their scientific community. And then it's going to be human sources on the ground. That is, what human assets do we have who penetrated the various Iranian institutions that could tell us what they're saying and thinking? Throw on top of that the Israeli community, the intelligence community as well, and the intelligence communities of our partners, the French, the British, and others, because this is really important. President Trump has made some very bold claims that the Iranian nuclear program has essentially been destroyed, but no real national security officials are going to say that without first proper bomb damage assessment after the strikes, but also that kind of the results of this intelligence soak. And as Michael will certainly profess, this is really important for upcoming diplomatic negotiations. We have to know what Iran still has. So a lot is riding on the performance of the intelligence community in the days and weeks ahead.
Well, there was a nuclear policy analyst who talked to the New Yorker, Mark, who said if the highly enriched uranium and centrifuge components are small, that means they're portable, they can be moved around the country, they can be hidden, and it's not an insignificant amount. The IAEA estimates 900 pounds. So how do we know whether the highly enriched uranium and centrifuge components were moved, as was suggested by some Iranian officials, before those bombs ever hit?
And Chris, it was also suggested by the vice president, who I think backtracked a little bit. But at one point, he said that perhaps this 400 kilograms of near weapons grade uranium may have been moved. There was all these photos of trucks outside the Fordo facility. We don't know exactly what that means. There's different interpretations, of course, from different proliferation experts. But again, it's going to take intelligence to actually tell us if they were moved and, of course, where they were moved. There was an Israeli press report today quoting Israeli officials say they actually might know where it was moved to. So I think there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes in terms of assessing exactly what happened here. And again, it is critically important for what would be pending negotiations now with the Iranians over the program.
It certainly also is, Michael, a topic of conversation, if not the only topic of conversation at the NATO summit, where we just saw Air Force One land. Do we think these world leaders all buy Trump's assessment? How much of their own intelligence are they relying on? Give us a sense of that and how it will shape these conversations.
Yeah, Chris, I don't think that they buy the president's assessment. And certainly no one is just going to go by, a public assurance from the American president. They're going to be relying heavily on their own intelligence services, and they're also going to want to see facts and evidence from Iran. Another piece of this, Chris, is that there are international nuclear inspectors whose job is to account for the state of Iran's program. And a big question is, whether and when the Iranians will let those UN inspectors see what has happened to their facilities, and will they, offer a full accounting of where all their uranium is. So, if they can't essentially produce it and show it to inspectors, which I think is really what's going to be required here to get serious negotiations going, they're going to have to give some explanation for where it is. And until they do that, there's going to be a very dark shadow over them. And this is going to be in a state of flux and distrust, and there can't be negotiations going forward. But, and maybe you want to turn to this, but I actually think that although there will be discussion about Iran here, Chris, there's some really big questions that are not related that are going to be hashed out at this NATO summit involving NATO's budgeting and Ukraine. So this conversation might change pretty quickly.
Yeah, and when you talk about Ukraine, when you talk about Gaza, I mean, it's understandable that when America does something they've never done before, which is that they drop these bunker buster bombs and in a surprise attack on a Saturday night, that becomes a key topic of conversation. But has it in the world distracted from all the other things that are going on and that have dominated two other wars that have dominated the conversation for so long?
Oh, it's certainly distracted. And I don't have to tell you, Chris, a Trump presidency is just constant sprint from one crisis or kettle boiling to another. And it's hard for people to multitask and keep their focus on all the things that are happening. But I do think that for an organization like NATO, these two questions, number one, how much is Trump going to force NATO members to increase their defense spending to this new target of 5% of GDP, which is going to be a very tough hill for many of these members to climb. How much is he going to demand this and perhaps imply that he won't defend or come to the defense of NATO members who don't spend that much money? That's a really big question for this organization. And then the second one is Ukraine. And although this Iran crisis is massive, the Ukraine war has been the dominant issue for NATO since February of 2022. And I think these countries are desperate to know whether the United States is walking away from this war and ending its support for Kyiv, or whether President Trump could possibly be persuaded to provide more of the support that Ukraine desperately needs to fight off the Russians at this point.
When you look at worldwide security, Mark, I mean, and the conversations that are going on now, it's clear from what we've heard from the president, his extreme frustration that the ceasefire was broken. It's clear that he wants to take an unambiguous victory lap for ending the war, ending the conflict, killing any of Iran's nuclear ambitions. But there have to be concerns by other countries. Could they get embroiled in a way they don't want to in all of this? And if Trump stokes divisions while he's there at NATO, could that just be playing into the hands of Xi Jinping?
Well, Chris, I think that the big thing for the NATO summit certainly is this European defense spending, NATO defense spending at 5%. And that's what Trump certainly wants. You know, he actually released a rather incredible text message he received from the NATO Secretary General Rutte, which was kind of this sycophantic groveling saying that, you know, we're with you, we're going to get you to this percentage. But I think the Europeans are doing this just to try desperately to get Trump to do something positive on Ukraine. And again, that really remains to be seen. There has been so many kind of threats of sanctions because of Vladimir Putin's intransigence. Nothing's happened. Zelensky will apparently be there at the meeting, so perhaps there'll be a Trump-Zelensky one-on-one. But I think you're right when you say, too, that, you know, kind of China watches all of this dysfunction as well. And Donald Trump ran on this notion of fixing all of the world's problems. And it seems to me that certainly that's not transpired, because, frankly, these are really intractable conflicts that take a lot of effort, just even one of them to try to get to any kind of solution. And he's got multiple ones going on, whether it's Gaza, whether it's Israel-Iran, or, of course, the war between Russia and Ukraine.
Well, I'm told we just saw Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, walking into the palace in Ukraine, in The Hague. So we'll see if that meeting takes place, and we'll see when the president gets off the plane what transpires over the next 24 hours or less when he's scheduled to be on the ground. Mark Polymeropoulos, Michael Crowley.